So yesterday, Pete Thamel wrote the story about the possibility of Greg Sankey being so angry that the college football playoff didn't expand that, he just might take the SEC and break away.
Yeah.
Be a runaway faction, a lone ranger.
A faction, I like that.
Yeah. They changed the name from the SEC to the SEF. It would be the Southeastern Faction, no longer the Southeastern Conference.
Factions are usually evil, so I like that.
So, Ross Dellinger at Sports Illustrated, after Pete Thamel at ESPN yesterday, kind of advanced the story. And boy, oh boy, is there some stuff in there. So a consulting group, the SEC hired a consulting company a couple of years ago, not a couple of years ago, I guess it would have been last year, where they talked to them about the possibility of scheduling models.
Yeah.
They said, hey, we got these two new teams that are coming into our league in a few years. They go by Texas and Oklahoma. Let's just call them that. I guess at that point the news was probably out.
Yeah.
Maybe they had already engaged this consulting group. I don't know. So we got to figure out a scheduling model for 16 teams.
Texas and Oklahoma.
And the consulting group came back with about 30 options. Those 30 options, Ross Dellinger writes, have been narrowed to two. Two. One option is an 8-game conference schedule where you have one permanent opponent.
Gee, I wonder who that would be for State and Ole Miss.
I think Ole Miss and Mississippi State would continue to play each other on an annual basis.
I think so.
I think
yeah, that's the next one, right? Well, who would Alabama continue to play on an annual basis?
Alabama, Auburn would play each other every year.
I believe you're correct.
Alabama, Auburn would play each other every year.
Georgia, Florida.
Georgia, Florida would get played every year.
Everything. Texas, Oklahoma will play every year.
Ooh.
I think they would play Oklahoma every year.
Yeah, you think it's OU, Texas, not Texas, Texas A&M?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And then everything else.
Georgia, Auburn?
No, because Georgia's playing Florida.
Oh, that's right, and Auburn's playing Alabama.
So, yeah, after those four matchups, everything else changes every year.
No.
I mean, I'm just saying, everything else is sort of up for grabs. Like, I don't know who Missouri's going to play every year. I don't know who Kentucky's going to play every year.
Missouri, Arkansas.
You think?
Or would you do Arkansas and A&M? Whatever. The point.
What is?
The point being, in this model where there is one permanent opponent and 7 rotating opponents.
Yes.
And in that model, that 8-game model with 7 rotating opponents, you would play everybody home and away in a 4-year cycle. The other model.
That's the one.
The other model is going to a 9-game conference schedule, which means unbalanced. 1 year you'd play 4 at home, the next year you'd play 5 at home, and that would just continue year in, year out. In this scenario, you have 3 permanent opponents, 3 teams that you play every single year, and then your other 6 rotate. And again, you would play home and away every campus in the league once every 4 years. You'd be guaranteed to do that. You obviously would have 3 where you played home and away, home every other year, away every other year. And then the rest would be like a biennial thing. Here's what is interesting to me and where Ross goes with this story. He said there is a split among league members, and that does not include Texas and Oklahoma because they are not yet league members. They do not get a vote in this. Their ADs will not be at spring meetings. This is expected to be the number 1 topic at SEC spring meetings in Destin next week. Yeah, they're going to talk about Jimbo and Saban and NIL and all that crap. But figuring out the scheduling model, getting to 16 teams, is top of the list of what's going to happen next week in Destin.
Yeah.
And he says that there is a split, maybe even a 50-50 split with current schools among what Ross Dellinger wrote were the traditional haves and have-nots. And it wasn't a derogatory term. It was basically based on budgets.
Yeah.
The top 7 budgets in the SEC are for 9 games because they generally have the best football teams. And the bottom 7 budgets in the SEC are, generally speaking, for 7 games. I don't know, and he didn't specify that was 100% accurate, but that was generally the dividing line.
Yeah.
We cover two teams in Mississippi State and Ole Miss that would fall into the bottom half.
Yeah.
The group that is expected to be in favor of an 8-game schedule as opposed to a 9-game schedule. I think it's reasonable to believe that Mississippi State and Ole Miss, John Cohen and Keith Carter, would be probably for the 8-game model.
I would think so.
I don't know that for certain, and I don't know if we can get the two of them to tell us that specifically.
Certainly not on the record.
But what do you guys think for Ole Miss and for Mississippi State? Should it be 8 or 9?
What's best for State and Ole Miss is 8. And to have that extra non-conference game to give you the extra cushion of a probable win to give yourself 8-9 win seasons more often than not. Nine conference games, you are going to be struggling to get more than 4 conference wins a year. I mean, four conference wins a year for State and Ole Miss is pretty good.
Traditionally.
Well, then you're talking about 7 and 5 might be your ceiling. I would want to keep 8 if I was State and Ole Miss.
Okay. Borky?
And I would hold firm on that if I were them. I know it balances out over time, and the NFL just did it. I mean, it used to be the NFL would have 16 games, 8-8. NBA had 82 games, 41-41. Major League Baseball, 162, on and on and on. But the NFL has broken that precedent, and so it would balance out because in years you have 4, the next year you'd have 5. But I still don't like the idea of being disadvantaged in your schedule in a given year. I really don't like that idea because what happens especially if you're Ole Miss and Mississippi State, where you don't have great teams on an annual basis, but you have one of those years where everything came together, you've got a good quarterback, you've evaluated well, and you've got a team that can win, and you've got to go on the road 5 times, and you're only hosting 4. So I don't like that concept from the jump. If I were Keith Carter and John Cohen, I'm holding firm on the 8.
Yeah, the 1 and 7 is the path to the national championship game for Mississippi State and Ole Miss. If you want me to expound on that, I'll get it when we come back.
Yeah, let's pick that conversation.
So before we went to the break, we were talking about the potential scheduling models. And I came out in favor of the 1-7. 1 permanent, 7 rotating. 8 conference games, so you keep your 4th non-conference game. If you're State and Ole Miss, when you look at that, Richard, you see schedules that you could have years where you don't play Alabama, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia. Like, your 7 could legitimately be.
Odds are it won't play.
Odds are, but there could be a situation where maybe you only play one of those teams, and you're 11-1. Because your other teams are Ole Miss, if you're State, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Vandy, Missouri, South Carolina, A&M, and I need one more, Arkansas.
Okay.
I mean, that's a year where you're going to go at least to a New Year's Six bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to go 10-2. You have a great chance to go 10-2, I should say. And for Ole Miss, it's the same way, where you have State and then you have six or 7 other teams like that. And yeah, maybe LSU finds their way in, or Texas, or one of these, the big programs. But you've shown you can play with them. The problem is you can't play with all of them. You can't play with
week in, week out.
Yeah, you can't go Alabama to LSU to Florida to Georgia. You can't do that. But if you've only got to play one of them, you got a chance. You got a fighting chance.
Sorry, I'm trying to recenter myself. I became angry. I became angry. Stop laughing at me.
Think about some things that make you happy, Your family.
Raindrops on roses.
Your family, your dog, pocket squares, just something that...
Shut up. Everything you said makes sense.
Yeah. Wow, okay.
Everything you said makes sense. So tell me why it is that I want 9 conference games.
Because you enjoy better football.
Because I know exactly correct. You want better games. You're more concerned about the quality of the games than the Ole Miss going to play for a national title. You got a little too you don't have enough homer in you.
It's a similar concept to the playoff expansion conversation. We don't need to expand the playoff to 12. We don't need it.
Right.
but it would add to the quality.
State and Ole Miss need it.
Yeah. We don't need to go to 9 conference games, but it would add to the quality of the season.
By the way, we talked yesterday about the playoff, a potential SEC-only playoff, an 8-team, let's say, SEC playoff. State and Ole Miss would have been in that last year. Ole Miss, obviously.
This is in the breakaway league?
Yeah, Ole Miss obviously would have been in it because they were by record were the 3rd best team, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure State. I know State was 4th in the West. I'm pretty sure they would have been in the top 8. Because I know LSU and Auburn would have been behind them, and then over there in the East, maybe who would have been ahead of them? Kentucky,
South Carolina.
South Carolina was 3 and 5 in the league because I know they had a
State go 3 and 5 or 4 and 4?
4 and 4. Remember they had a non-conference loss to Memphis.
That's right. Yeah.
So State would have been in the national championship playoff at 7 and 5 last year.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
So again, I go back to what I said a second ago. Everything you said makes sense. It is more beneficial for Mississippi State and for Ole Miss to play an 8-game conference slate. And if you play an 8-game conference slate, you keep the Power 5 mandate in there. You got to play another Power 5 league, but you get to determine who that is, and it doesn't have to be Alabama.
Right. It's Arizona State if you're Mississippi State. Who does Ole Miss have coming up?
Georgia Tech this year. They've got there's Southern Cal coming up in a couple of years.
Hey, that's an easy win. SEC Pac-12, always take the SEC team.
How much fun is that trip going to be?
Oh, going out to L.A.?
How many, assuming Lane Kiffin is still the head coach at Ole Miss.
Which isn't a big assumption, but we'll see.
How many Ole Miss fans are going to the Coliseum to watch the Rebels play Southern Cal?
You have a legitimate chance to take 10,000 out there, I think. Maybe more.
Yeah, I was going to guess 15.
Because
that's a lot of people.
But that's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't go to L.A., but to see Ole Miss play in the Coliseum, yeah, that's never happening. It's very rarely going to happen again. Maybe another 50 years.
Borky, you made the trip to Berkeley. You planned that one a long time ago in advance.
I proposed out there. That was the cover as we're going to a football game, but in reality,
the whole rationale was to go get on a boat and pop the question.
That's right. And then afterwards,
you proposed around a football game?
No,
sly
on a
dog.
Sailboat in the. I used the football game as the cover to get out to California. Yeah.
That's pretty smart.
It was good. It was good.
I'll give you credit. I didn't know you had that in you. Good job.
So would you plan far enough? I mean, I know that you can't propose again, but would you plan far enough in advance to say, look, I'm going to Los Angeles for Ole Miss Southern Cal?
Look, and you know how there's – and you're not wrong. Living in California right now would be a very difficult thing to do. There's a lot of problems and stuff like that. You can go to L.A. for a few days and have a blast, like the time of your life kind of blast. So, yeah, that would be something that I would do.
Have the time of my life. 2025.
That's not that far away.
At Southern Cal.
What else they got? Wake Forest.
2026 hosting Southern Cal.
Oregon State, Wake Forest. These are games I would predict Ole Miss to be able to win.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss's future Power 5 opponents, Georgia Tech in 22 and on the road, Georgia Tech at home in 23, at Wake Forest in 24, Wake Forest at home 25.
USC.
They play they host Wake Forest and go to USC in 2025.
That's tough.
By the way, that is a problem if a 9-game conference schedule begins in 2025.
Yeah, because you're going to drop the Citadel, and Tulane will be the only one that you're just like, yeah, for sure, we're going to win that one. That's the other side of that coin.
You're trying to drop Wake Forest, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a home game. No, you're going to try to drop USC. You got to try to move that game.
You can't do that.
You got to move it. You got to move it to 27. You got to move it and get rid of Oregon State or something. I don't know. You got to get rid of at UConn in 27, and you just take your chance. You make a little West Coast swing. You stay on the West Coast for a week. Do something like that. I don't know. Figure it out.
Ole Miss at UConn is gross.
It really is.
That's almost as bad as Mississippi State playing UMass at Gillette Stadium.
That
was gross.
At least that was at Gillette Stadium in an NFL stadium.
No, there was nothing about that game that wasn't gross.
In fairness, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And the uniforms were probably the grossest part for State. But that was a game that they had to schedule in the summer before that season.
I understand.
It just they didn't have a whole lot of options.
I don't know that you're not better off just not playing a game.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
They won the game, so at least they got a win out of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Borky, can you make any other argument if you're an Ole Miss guy or a State guy, if you're Keith Carter or John Cohen, if you're an Ole Miss fan or a State fan, for the 9-game schedule beyond more SEC games are more fun than not?
No. I had a State fan earlier say something to me that said, I know I love playing Alabama. It's an easy road trip for us. And I said, well, you're 2-18 in the last 20 years against Alabama and haven't beaten them since 2007. Don't you want a break from that? No, there is no true program health argument. You know what? Maybe money. As Haydad says all the time, maybe it's just money. Maybe Keith Carter and John Cohen realize an extra SEC game in our town every other year would bring more money, and maybe that's the driver. But if you want to sustain success, you want that non-conference game that you can schedule as opposed to getting Oklahoma and Georgia and Florida rotating on and off every other year. If I'm them, I'm standing firm and I don't change my mind. We're staying at 8 conference games. If it's 1+7, it's 1+7. I'll keep my in-state rival, and I will continue to schedule Wake Forest.
All right, so there has to be a majority vote among the athletics directors to present a proposal to the presidents. What's more likely? If it is divided 7-7, 7 biggest budgets, 7 smallest budgets, what's more likely? One of the big boys swaying one of the small guys, or one of the small guys swaying one of the big boys? Do they go with the 8 or they go with the 9? What did I just say? We aren't going to know until we know. Because
you don't score until you score.
We will know soon enough whether or not it's going to be an 8-game schedule or a 9-game schedule in the SEC. But the fun part is, well, if it was a 9-game schedule, who would your 3 permanent opponents be? Ross had some ideas that he put in his story. Ross Dellinger did at Sports Illustrated. But before we do that, the question that I asked before we went to the break, what is more likely? And Ross put the line of delineation in the story for the 7 haves versus the 7 have-nots. There was only one that surprised me, and that was Tennessee being in the bottom group. So he had...
Let me see if I can guess. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, A&M, Auburn, Florida, and then it's
Oklahoma, Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, we're counting.
I mean, yeah, look into the 16.
But we're talking about the ones right now, though, for this vote.
Yes, but he was saying when you're talking about where at the final number of 8 and 8.
So is it Arkansas or Tennessee that's the last of the current Big 7?
Well, I don't know of the current, because Texas and Oklahoma would be 2 of the 8. Okay. He would basically be going with their 6 current.
Okay.
So you're saying Texas and Oklahoma.
Well, then, yeah, Tennessee and Arkansas
A&M,
will be on the second half.
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and, well, I'm too short.
So LSU,
and Auburn. Yeah. So those would be your top 8.
Yeah.
And then your bottom 8 would be Mississippi State and Ole Miss,
South Carolina,
Kentucky, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Missouri.
Yeah.
So those would be your 8. And again, it's not like it's some slap.
And the thing is,
it's not Ross Dellinger being mean. This is kind of the dividing line on the budgets.
You have some alliances within those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like for Mississippi State, having Scott Strickland at Florida is kind of a friendly voice. Greg Byrne at Alabama is kind of a guy who's like, I'm not going to go out of my way. You know, I got to take care of Alabama first.
I thought you guys hated Scott Strickland.
Yeah, but he doesn't hate Mississippi State.
Oh, okay.
So, and I'm sure Keith Carter has similar friendships of people who's like, look, I'm not going to go out of my way to screw Ole Miss. So, you know, you never know what's going to happen in back channel deals. But you're right in that somebody's going to have to change their mind. And I just feel like it's a lot easier for somebody to say, look.
So the easy answer, right, is
for money to talk.
That one of the big boys talks, and you say more money because more games. But the reality is the way the new contract is drawn up, the money doesn't change. You would have to renegotiate that.
Yeah.
The money would not change for what would be 8 additional conference games.
Mm-hmm.
So if the money's not getting bigger, what would the carrot be? Borky, what's your thought? More likely, some faction of Arkansas, Tennessee, Ole Miss convinces Auburn to say, let's stay at 8. Or some combination of Auburn and Texas A&M and
LSU,
Georgia, or LSU convinces one of those schools on the other side to go, you know what, let's do 9.
I mean, what could you even pitch on either side that would change a mind? Because
I got one idea.
Okay.
I only got one idea.
I have an idea. Go ahead with yours.
My pitch is to Tennessee.
And what would you pitch them?
I would say, depending on who this person is that is trying to convince Danny White, look, man, we got the grown-up table over here, and we got the kiddie table. You don't belong at the kiddie table, and you know that. Why don't you start acting like a grown-up and do what's in the best interest of the conference as a whole as you guys are growing, and take your place at the grown-up table instead of voting with them. That's what I'd pitch.
The way I would go is the other way, and I would try to get Auburn and be like, are you really going to sit here in Alabama, who has screwed you since the day they opened the doors? You're really going to vote with them on this? You're really going to give them what they want? You can't do that. That's how I would look at it.
I might pitch Texas
Could you pitch?
No.
Could you pitch A&M?
That may be
That's
your deal.
A&M's the weak link.
Maybe you go to A&M and say, you don't want to play Texas every year, here's your chance.
You're right, because they will keep Texas.
You have been kicking and screaming and crying about not wanting to play Texas every year.
Yeah.
Well, if we go to a 9-team schedule where there are 3 opponents,
There's no way.
Texas every year.
There's no way Texas A&M is not a permanent game on 3 permanents.
On 3s.
But on 1,
if it's 1, they're not going to be your
they'll
permanent
be playing
because they're
Oklahoma.
going to keep Texas OU together.
Yeah, you're right. That is the way.
That's the 8-team proponents swaying a vote. And the other way, I think Tennessee's who you pick off, and you try to convince them that they are more like the bigger schools than the smaller schools.
I agree. I mean, I like that way too. I like playing up people's insecurities. That's a great method for negotiation. But the other way is easier, I think.
What if you get a flip in both directions? What if you flip Tennessee to the big guys and Ross and Texas A&M go to the other side, and you're still
then you go to Auburn with what I just said. You're like, come on.
All right, so here you go. This is the fun part, right? If it were to go to a 9-game schedule, here are your 3. Borky, you're convinced that this is more than just spitballing, and more than just dry erase board writing and erasing.
You know Ross Dellinger by now. He doesn't work in, hey, this would be fun.
No. Missouri's 3 opponents. Oklahoma.
Oh,
Arkansas.
right off the bat.
South Carolina.
That's about as good as they could have hoped for.
Oh, and by the way, using this whole delineation of 8 up, 8 down.
Yeah.
The way they've structured this is if you're in the top 8, you play 2 top 8 teams and 1 bottom 8 team.
Okay.
If you're in the bottom 8, you play 2 bottom 8 teams and 1 top 8 team.
Fantastic.
I actually
Arkansas.
think that's really smart. I can't believe they came up with this.
Yeah, Arkansas.
Well, Ross came up with it.
Missouri, Texas, Kentucky.
Sure.
That's a pretty dang good draw for Arkansas.
That's about as good as they could hope for.
Texas A&M, LSU, Texas, Mississippi State.
So no East team for Texas A&M.
Yeah, but they get one of those garbage programs, trash programs. I mean, that's what they say, right? I mean, I'm not real fired up about that at Texas A&M because that's 3 teams that I lose to.
Yeah, that's not a great draw for A&M.
Texas gets Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas.
So we're back to the Southwest Conference.
Yeah, I don't
like
know.
That.
I'm here to tell you that's a pretty sexy schedule for Texas.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then when you get Alabama and you get Georgia coming out.
Oh, man.
God, I love college football so much.
Oklahoma gets Texas, Missouri, and Florida.
OU, Florida. That's probably the 2 furthest away schools, isn't it?
Yes. LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama.
Sucks for them.
Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah.
LSU.
Sure.
Vanderbilt.
That's as good as you could possibly get. They got the best draw.
Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Texas A&M.
I mean, Kentucky's been their East permanent for so long, I guess. Dan Mullen loves that rivalry. It's a big rivalry game.
Alabama. Iron Bowl. Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee.
Yeah, and then LSU.
And then LSU.
I mean, Alabama, what are you going to do?
You can't.
Alabama's
can't kill
low-budget
Alabama,
school.
LSU.
Their low-budget schools are Auburn and Tennessee. They got the best of the worst.
Yeah. Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Vanderbilt.
Oh, they're the only thing got to play. They're the team that has to play Alabama and Georgia every year. Oh,
Vanderbilt gets Tennessee.
I just sold Auburn. Like, that's who you're going to play. You're going to play Alabama and Georgia every season. Do you want that? Is that what you want? Auburn's no way they're voting for that.
Vanderbilt is Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Auburn.
Oh, God.
Tennessee is Vanderbilt, Alabama, South Carolina.
All right.
It's not bad.
That's not bad at all for Tennessee.
Kentucky gets Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Georgia.
Oh. Why Georgia?
You got to play somebody.
I guess.
Georgia gets Auburn, Florida, and Kentucky.
Eh.
Florida gets Georgia, South Carolina, and Oklahoma.
Okay.
And South Carolina gets Florida, Missouri, and Tennessee.
I mean, I love the games. Don't get me wrong. They're exciting matchups, but I'm selling Auburn on you will play Alabama and Georgia every year until the end of time. Is that really what you want to do?
16 schools listed there. Who got the best draw?
Ole Miss. Because they got Vanderbilt, and they got State, who, you know, I mean,
they got
I
Vanderbilt,
love my Bulldogs,
exactly.
well, they got Vanderbilt, and I love my Bulldogs, but, I mean, that's a team that is not year in, year out a top-tier team in the West.
Yeah, I mean, over like the last 40 years, it's a split series.
Yeah, exactly. And then who was the other? LSU? That's a team they can beat. They've shown they can beat every, one out of every three at least.
I think Texas got the best.
Texas got the most exciting.
Yeah. Oklahoma, A&M, and Arkansas.
Yes.
That is
There's a guy who might know a thing or two about the Ole Miss Rebels right behind us.
He just might. David Kellum showing